Hello, everyone, and welcome to Neurocracy. Today, we're joined by Dr. Renske Lok, a postdoctoral scholar at Stanford Center for Sleep Sciences and Medicine. She earned her PhD studying how light affects human alertness, thermoregulation, and sleep, and now works to translate those insights into clinical and behavioral interventions. Dr. Lok, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. I'm excited for this.
So, my first question for you is what first drew you to study sleep?
I was very intrigued by sleep because, like many people going to college, I noticed I was curtailing my sleep quite a lot to
Yeah.
meet college expectations and to do all the fun stuff that college has to offer as well. And I got really intrigued by how this influenced my cognitive performance long
Okay.
term,
Yeah.
but also my health and well-being, because I definitely noticed that if I didn't sleep enough, I would get a bit cranky during the day and some other consequences. And I never really thought about it too much until I had a course on chronobiology and sleep,
Okay.
and it taught me a lot
Yeah.
about how nighttime sleep influences how you feel during the day and how
Right.
important it is for everyday life, really.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, how did you get attracted into studying how light specifically affects sleep?
It's very similar, actually,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
I never knew that there were effects of light beyond vision. Like I
Right.
just really had no idea. And
Yeah.
so I did my PhD in the Netherlands, and there the application program for getting into a PhD program is a little bit different. So you usually get a description of a project already generally.
Okay.
So I applied for this specific PhD program focused on light and non-image forming effects because I was so intrigued by the fact that light can have these influences beyond vision. And I had no idea what it entailed. And I told myself, I'm just if I get in, like I'll do it and I'll do it to the best of my abilities. And if I don't like it, then I'll just
Yeah.
quit. And I
Yeah.
ended up really, really loving it.
That's
So
that's amazing. So, could
yeah.
you actually briefly explain how daytime light exposure affects sleep for the listeners, and just to provide a background for our conversation as we go into more detailed questions? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there are many ways that light influences our mood, alertness during the daytime, and also how we sleep at night. So through one of the mechanisms through which light does this is called circadian rhythms. And, for those who do not know, we all have an internal clock that ticks with a speed of approximately 24 hours.
Yeah.
And when you first get light during the day and when you last get light during the day, that is going to influence how quickly or how slowly your clock ticks. And the rule of thumb in general is morning light, so light that you get in the beginning of the day generally speeds up your clock a little bit, and light that you get late at night slows down your clock a little bit. And you know, a lot of people have heard about blue light at night and how it's so
Right.
bad being on your phone in the evening and it delays
Yeah.
sleep. And in part, the mechanism is because of that. So if you get light late at night, it's going to push your clock out and basically going to tell your circadian system, like, hey, it's not time to go to sleep yet. Let's stay up a little bit longer. So this is the main way through which light can influence your timing of sleep. And there is
Okay.
some like preliminary data, basically like new studies coming out that is also showing that how much light you get during the day can influence how deep you sleep, for example. So
Oh, okay.
if you sleep very light or if you sleep very deep and
Yeah.
how long and consolidated, so how much of that is in one stretch, can also be determined by how much light you're getting during the day.
Yeah. So my next question is a little bit more into the light itself. So there's
Okay.
obviously multiple sources of light, right? So for
Mhm.
example, like right now when I'm recording, I have a ring light right in front of me that
Right.
that is pretty bright. But at the
Mhm.
same time, that's not the same as sunlight. So could you
Right.
talk a little bit about maybe how different sources of light can have different impacts on sleep or maybe not have different impacts?
Yeah, and in part, I have to preface this a bit by saying that there's a lot that we still don't know.
Right, right.
What I can tell you is how different light sources are different and how they could potentially influence, let's say, the downstream effects.
Yeah.
Um, because, for example, if you think about sunlight, or not even the sun doesn't even have to be out, it can just be daylight in general.
Okay.
Um, It has two important components. One is the intensity. I mean, people go outdoors, they put on sunglasses, right? Because the sun is really intense. And if we talk about the intensity of a light source, we generally refer to lux. It's the unit of light.
Yeah.
And basically, how higher the amount of lux is, how brighter a light is. And this can be quite comfortable, like your ring light is probably quite comfortable. Um,
It's actually fairly high, I would say. I could probably tone it down a little, but
okay,
yeah.
fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely a comfort with how intense a light can be.
Right.
And then also the directionality, because sunlight usually comes from above instead
Mhm.
of like right in front of you. So the angle at which it enters your eye is very different.
Yeah.
And then the last component is actually the spectrum. So basically, which colors are in lighting.
Yeah.
If we talk about daylight or natural light, it usually has a range of colors. So every wavelength, it's called, every wavelength of light is in that light source. And usually, when we talk about indoor light sources, such as fluorescent lighting or LED lighting, it usually doesn't have all wavelengths in equal amounts because it's really hard to recreate daylight, basically. So
Okay.
sometimes, if you think about, for example, a hospital with kind of bluish lighting, it
Yeah.
literally means that there is more light in the blue range in that white light lamp, and
Uh,
that makes it feel a bit more, yeah, colder or coolish.
yeah.
And if you think about lighting in the evening that you turn on at home, usually it has a bit more of a warmer color. So usually it has a bit more of the longer wavelength, so the reds and so forth. Um, so different colors and different intensities have different effects on your circadian clock.
Yeah.
And how different exactly is really dependent on you and your
Mm.
daily patterns. So, for
Yeah.
example, if every day for your lunch break, you go outdoors and you take a nice little stroll, you get a lot of light at that time.
Right.
And then probably like all the light that you're going to get in the evening, it's not going to change your circadian clock by that much because you gave it such a strong signal when you
Oh,
went
okay.
out during the
Yeah.
lunch break that
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter. But sometimes for a lot of college students, for example, that sit indoors a lot and maybe
Yeah.
don't go out at all,
Yeah.
and then they're exposed to a lot of evening light, then evening light can have a big effect on
Right.
sleep timing, sleep quality, and how you feel in general as well.
I guess it's kind of relative, like within the day itself, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And maybe one important point to note, because sometimes people are like, oh, does the sun have to be out to get this super high intensity
Right.
lighting? And the answer is really no. Even like on
Okay.
overcast days, the amount of light intensity that you get from going outdoors is many, many times higher that you'll get from any indoor lighting source, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So following up on this idea, I know one of the things that's preached online, especially on this podcast too, is the importance of morning light exposure, right? And I think like the gold standard is going outside, getting exposed to sunlight, whether it's overcast or not. I think either way there's going to be benefits. But what if like you're not able to go outside? Is there still benefit for me to turn on blast lights in my room? Does that play a role? Or how does that kind of compare to sunlight? If you kind of understand what I'm trying to say, like the different, once again, kind of sticking to this idea of different sources of light and how they like can be used differently. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I do think it can make a big difference. Let's also not forget about windows, obviously.
Oh
Like
yeah, yeah.
sitting close
Windows are
to a
yeah, that's true.
window,
That's probably
you get a
ideal
lot
too.
of lighting. Yeah,
Yeah,
but also
yeah.
from most electrical light sources, like generally speaking, in offices or so, you get 300 lux anyway. And
Right.
as I said, I believe that it's all relative. So
Okay.
if other than that, like you don't get a lot of different lighting, this will be your main lighting source, and your circadian system will interpret it as such.
Okay. I
Does
see.
that make sense?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think you mentioned this earlier, but I guess like all the light sources have like slightly different compositions,
Hmm.
and the body will likely respond differently to these kind of
Correct.
compositions. Okay, interesting. That's cool.
Yeah, because it all goes through photoreceptors in the
Right,
eye,
right.
right?
Yeah.
And photoreceptors respond to different colors of lighting.
Right.
So
Yeah.
in that sense, the kind of colors that are in light also have an effect in addition to light intensity. So it's really,
Yeah.
you cannot really see that, you cannot refer to the two components independently because it's
Yeah.
not just spectrum. Like
I
people
think
will really preach about blue light and blue, blue,
yeah.
blue. It's really blue light in combination with a high
Yeah.
light
I think it's
intensity.
in like kind of like an interplay. It's not just like one. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, correct.
So, one of my favorite topics to talk about on this channel is light interventions and kind of like the research going on because I think it's super cool and I think it's going in like a really amazing direction, especially. and I'm excited to see where it goes in the next 5 to 10 years. So I believe one of your recent papers, you've examined flash therapy, like
Mhm.
light flashes during sleep to try to shift circadian timing. Could you
Correct.
explain a little bit of how that works and maybe the promising direction it's headed in?
Yeah, I mean, I think flash therapy is one of these really cool but kind of weird things that we're trying out.
Okay.
Because I think when we initially started out these experiments, we did not really think too much of it, like the biological reasoning for flashes being more efficient than continuous light was really like, oh, maybe we can prime the photoreceptors, like we can stimulate the photoreceptors more by giving flashes of light instead of a continuous light source. And
Yeah.
when you have questions like these, the best thing you can do is really go out and test them. So
Yeah.
we built like some sort of light goggle device that
Okay.
basically gives light at a very specific low light intensity, but enough to penetrate the eyelids. So basically, you're asleep with these goggles on, and these light flashes, very brief light flashes, they penetrate your eyelids sufficient so that the photoreceptors in your eyes actually get activated.
That's so cool.
It's really cool, and
Yeah.
it's really efficient because in this way, like if I gave you a continuous light pulse, you would wake up 100%, like there's no question about it, right? But
Right,
because
right.
these light pulses are so brief,
Mm.
like you don't really notice them, even though your photoreceptors do
Yeah.
get activated.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So you can
Yeah.
shift the circadian clock without disrupting your sleep, which is very cool, I think.
Yeah. And then I believe, is phototherapy similar to that, or is that its own technique?
So phototherapy, I think in general, is a bit more referring to the usage of light therapy to treat disorders. So
Okay.
it can
Okay.
be a skin disorder, it can be seasonal affective disorder,
Right.
and it usually relies on continuous light exposure.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's not really flash therapy
Okay,
related.
okay, I see. So I think one of the things interesting, oh, sorry, my phone's ringing. I don't know if you hear it, but
Oh no, you're all
okay.
good.
So one of the things interesting about flash therapy, I guess, like hearing you mention it, is I know one of the things in neuroscience is adaptation. Do you think
Mhm.
maybe that plays a little bit of a role in maybe why, um, I guess like these flashes of lights might also work compared to like longer continuous exposure to an extent?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, I do
Yeah.
think so. Like I think when we try to think of these experimental designs, and of course I say it in such a simple way, like we have flashes of a certain intensity that last for a certain duration. But of
Right.
course, this is already years and years of research in which we're trying to figure out what are the intensities that are sufficient to penetrate the eyelid but not
Yeah.
wake you up. How long should a flash last to actually activate the photoreceptors? So there's a lot of stuff that comes into
Yeah.
this and thinking about the photobiology really of the eye
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
So, do you think this might have any future uses for shift workers or maybe sleep deprived people, especially in the healthcare industry? Because that's some place that I'm wanting to go in. And one of my like interests in the future is maybe like finding like or being able to contribute to research on these kind of interventions that can help people who have very like difficult sleep schedules or irregular ones. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, I
okay.
think that's a great application. I think shift
Yeah.
work, jet lag management, these are all things where these kind of interventions can come in handy. And especially since we know more and more about the consequences of shift work,
Yeah.
both from a psychological and a physiological perspective,
Right.
right? Because we
Yeah.
know it's bad for the human body. And
Right.
people, generally speaking, people don't like doing shift work.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say is the single biggest obstacle right now from like I guess is it just time? Like, do we need more time to spend like researching this? What would you say is the single biggest obstacle right now that's preventing this from being used like throughout the world right now? Because yeah, I guess that's just the question. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think there are two components. One is the translation component, because this is a study that we did in our laboratory right here.
right. Okay, I see.
And then the translation component, like first of all, a company has to pick it up and commercialize it. And then you have to get buy-in from people as well. And I think right now, and it's starting to change, I feel, but a lot of people still don't really believe in light as a therapeutic. So it's
Yeah,
really hard to sell
right.
the idea of like, hey, this can really, really help you. So I think that is a big thing.
Okay.
The other big problem that we still have till now is that we don't really understand inter-individual differences. So
Okay.
we
I
do
see.
these
Yeah.
experiments in
Yeah.
very controlled circumstances. And again, I give you a snippet of what we do, but there's a lot of things that we control for that we tell participants to do or not to do before they come into the laboratory. And we know that if we take those restrictions away, the results are not as convincing as they are, just because you allow for more variability to be
Yeah.
introduced.
Yeah.
And I think, a big part of where the sleep circadian field is going is um, to try and really better understand these individual
Yeah.
factors.
Yeah.
How can we use these to optimize therapies?
Yeah.
And
So
that's a
actually, you brought up this interesting idea that's popped into my head. So I know one of the things that I talk about a lot on this channel, or like really the guests talk about, is the technology that's being developed right now to try to get like an individual snapshot of where someone's circadian like rhythm is at, like for them specifically. For example, I don't know if you know about the time signature, or I think yeah, okay. So I guess at Northwestern, like they're trying to do those two like blood draws and then trying to find like
ah,
individual.
mhm,
Yeah, yeah.
yes,
So I'm
yes.
curious, like, do you think maybe one day in the future, like being able to combine this individual snapshot with interventions like light therapy to better optimize like algorithms maybe or data to have an individual almost technology to like, help people with sleep could be developed?
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
do think so, and I do feel like that is where the field and the industry is also moving, and you'll see it, like companies like Garmin and Aura
Oh
Rings,
yeah.
like they're
Yeah.
already kind of moving into that space, and it's
Mhm.
not quite the same because obviously they're not doing blood draws, but it's
Right, right.
definitely
Yeah.
getting into the whole, taking biomarkers as a proxy for what's going
Yeah.
on in your body and therewith giving you some control. I
Yeah.
think that is where the field is going. I think we're not there yet, though,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
it's hard to determine, right? Like even if you know what is your
Yeah.
circadian clock phase,
Right.
what does that mean for you, and what can you do with that information even?
Right.
So there's still a lot to be done, I feel.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously we've been talking about interventions and data and the future of the research, but I know that a lot of our sleep can be influenced by the decisions that we make. So
Mhm.
what advice do you have for, especially for students like me who face early school start times that are outside of our
Yeah.
control, and
Mhm.
we often face like, sleep loss, sleep deprivation. What
Yeah.
advice do you have for people in general, and maybe with the specificity toward teenagers? To who are trying to optimize their sleep and circadian alignments, what practical advice do you have for them that could be regarding light or sleep practices in general?
Right.
Yeah.
Um, well, I think I would like to say first that being a student is very hard, and it's a
Yeah.
difficult group, to treat because, yeah, you do
Yeah.
have these dual
Right.
pools of school start times, but also having to finish your homework
Yeah.
and wanting to have a social life, for
Yeah.
example. And I think what I would say from a physiology perspective, like for example, I would recommend do not be exposed to too much lighting in the evening.
Mm.
Try to, before you go to bed, try to be engaged in calming activities. Like some people
Yeah.
like meditation, or it can even be reading a book or
Yeah.
watching your comfort show, but really winding down before you go to bed. Also to allow your body to send that signal like, hey, actually, I'm tired and I don't want to be scrolling on Instagram or playing video games. Like I
Yeah.
actually want to go to bed.
Yeah.
Um, but the difficulty of it is, and the trade-off is sometimes the mental health component, right?
Yeah.
Because these can be things that make you feel really happy, my bad.
Yeah.
So sometimes the advice that you would have for a physiological perspective, like get sufficient sleep, is not always the advice that you would give for a mental health perspective, right? So
Right.
yeah, and I do think sleeping sufficient on weekends or when you can is important to catch up a little bit on that sleep deprivation that you do get during the week in general.
Yeah. So my final question for you is if you had the ability to wave a magic wand and
Mhm.
share or and change one thing in society or maybe like Stanford University's campus, just I guess like a societal or systemic change. If you could just wave a magic wand, what would it be to improve sleep? And that this could be anything. This could be relating to like scheduling, this could be relating to light exposure, like any sort of creative idea. And I ask this question a lot and people say very different things. So you can take kind of like a creative approach with it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that automatically comes to mind is really sleep inequities.
Hmm.
Not
Okay.
everybody sleeps the same way, and I think a
Yeah.
big component is socioeconomical status, what
Yeah,
are your sleeping arrangement? Do you share your bedroom with multiple people? Do you have a lot of worries, for example,
right.
about, money, school, other things? So I think it would be great if the resources that we have would be more equitable and
Yeah,
shareable, and that it would be efficient for everybody in the same way.
yeah,
Especially since we do know that sleeping is so important for longevity, health, and also how you do in school every day, you know?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah. I don't know if that is where you wanted the answer to go, but
No, that's actually very, I love when someone says something I haven't heard before. So that's
oh,
actually
that's
beautiful. That's
good.
amazing. And you know what's funny? So I'm actually working with a state senator right now to try to push back our school start times in Missouri and try to like
Great.
draft legislation for that. And I wrote like an essay to try to like, get her to talk to me and show that I actually done my research.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I talked about or really emphasized in that was how people who have to work jobs or maybe
Hmm.
lower socioeconomic status
Oh,
often are
yeah.
affected more by earlier school start times, and
Yeah.
it piles on for them, especially when they have to ride the bus, for instance. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of factors that people who aren't in that situation don't realize that makes it
Exactly.
harder for them to catch up on sleep, which inherently creates this feedback loop that I think makes
Yeah,
life more difficult. But
absolutely. And I
yeah,
completely agree because it's such a boulder
yeah,
rolling down a hill because,
right,
yeah, you're already tired. You make more mistakes in school, you do worse, and
yeah,
then you have more worries about that. And yeah, for sure. And I'm happy about all these legislations that are
oh
starting
yeah.
to push back school
Yeah, I
start,
know. In the past couple of years, I think a lot of states have been making progress toward it. So
which is
I hope in the
great.
next couple of years, like we're able to see a more change. But
Yeah. And it makes all the sense, because something that
right,
I didn't mention, but especially for teenagers, they tend to have so much later circadian time actually. They prefer to go to bed later, they prefer to wake up later, and that's just, it coincides with the age group that you're in. So it doesn't make
right.
sense to make you go to school at like 8 a.m. or
Yeah.
7:30
Or
or
mine starts
whatever
at
it
7:30.
is.
So
Wow,
yeah. And you know what's
that's
funny
crazy.
actually? I actually took like I think 2 hour nap after school today before the interview. So I woke up
Yeah,
like 20 minutes before. So
yeah.
I think it's just funny to see it like how right now like I'm kind of sleep deprived in a way. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, it's really uncomfortable, right? Being sleep deprived
Right.
and knowing that you're in school, that you have to do your best and that you
Yeah.
have to pay attention. And it's not strange that people drink a lot of coffee
Yeah, I
to
know. The other thing
combat
is,
things
the
like this.
addictions people develop at such a young age to caffeine and,
Yes.
energy drinks too, I think are even
Energy
worse.
drinks.
Like Red
I,
Bulls, it's glorified right now, actually, to like have a Red Bull. Like,
yeah.
I'm pulling all-nighters, bro. Like, you know what I mean? I think it's kind of
Oh.
a toxic, like social construct too at a
It's
certain point. Yeah.
very toxic. And I think you also get like kind of the dual component, right? Because first of all, you're super sleep deprived, which is already unhealthy.
Yeah.
And we know that these energy drinks, like they have really bad long-term effects,
Yeah, they're
mostly
not gonna
on heart
help,
health.
even maybe in the short term if it feels like they are. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
So it's really, yeah, it's
And I
really
guess
a
the
tough
long-term
battle.
outcomes are what worry me the most, especially
Yeah,
as the younger generation grows into the next generation of adults. I'm worried about how maybe health outcomes are affected by these kind of trends that we're seeing. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's very mature of you because I do think a lot of young people, they tend to, your outlook tends to be a little bit shorter, like
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
getting through the week or getting through the
yeah,
school year or so. And rarely you think about, okay, what consequence does this have
yeah.
for me 20 years down the line or so?
And kind of adding on to that, I think even if like, younger people do have a longer term outlook, it's generally in like broader, like I'd say like economic goals, like maybe get a good job, pursue like academic interests. But I think it's sometimes people don't prioritize like themselves, like their body, And at the
Yeah,
end of the day, like in our lives, we only get one body, right? So I think it's important to be able to
absolutely.
prioritize it. And it's something I've been kind of learning on this podcast and in the past couple of years of my own life. So
I think that's
yeah.
great. And it's so important, because it's true. And, by the time you get sick, it's too late already
Right,
because all of
exactly.
this has
Yeah.
been piling up for years and years to come.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it can be hard because they'll tell you like to exercise, to eat healthy,
Yeah.
to sleep enough. And it's like, okay, but how am I supposed to live my
Yeah.
life? So there is a balance
Yeah.
in everything. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on that note, Dr. Locke, thank you so much for joining me today. I think we had an amazing conversation and it was great to hear you speak.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun. Thank you.
Yeah.